Hello everyone and welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It is the 6th of July. I hope you have all been well and I'm very much enjoying the idea of spending this next half hour with you to delve into the joys of the ancient world and leave our cares of the modern world behind for just a brief moment in time. So thank you as ever for all of your fantastic questions that have been coming in. As ever, it is a joy to see them and to see all the weird and wacky and wonderful directions that your questions take us into the different parts of the ancient world. And also it has been a joy this time round to review all of the questions that we have been answering over the last couple of months, because today, yes, is Prize Week. We can bring back Prize Week indeed. And for those of you unfamiliar with Prize Week, this is what we do. We look at the questions that we have been able to answer over the last couple of Q&As, and then we pick one of them, the best question that set up the most interesting discussion or thoughtful ideas about the ancient world, or just took us down a pathway that we'd never really thought of before, and that person gets a prize. And in this case, it is prizes of X marks the spot. Yes, the winner will get a signed copy of my book dedicated to them with whatever inscription they would so desire, and posted out to them wherever they may be in the world. So, without further ado, we have been looking back at quite a few Q&As since we last had a Prize Week. I've been waiting for copies of X Marks the Spot to get into my sticky fingers to be able to kind of offer them out to everyone. Hello everyone, hello Dee, hello Alexis, hello Marietta, hello Rosie. How are you all? Thank you so much indeed for joining in on this bright sunny afternoon. But yes, there's some great questions, and just picking out some of my favourites. No winner declared yet, but some. So for instance, back a little while ago, Stacey Sipes, we asked about Thanksgiving in the US and talking about multiple celebrations in the ancient world, particularly relating to harvest and plenty, and we had a chat about some of them. Mariam Zaidi asked about lying on a hard couch, and wasn't it rather uncomfortable having to eat sideways, and how did people deal with that sort of indigestion that may have come about as a result of the ancient world? So we talked about kind of how people sat differently, and we're just used to sitting differently as well, but kind of again very different when we try and do it today. Elizabeth Henriksen asked about coping with bad eyesight in ancient times. This was another one of my favourites. Did they have glasses? Dee Gilbert talked about the Netflix documentary or docu-series portraying Cleopatra as black, and the controversy around that. So we had a good look at that. Chantal de Briand talked about dentistry in ancient Egypt, and Varsha Roche asked about cutting fingernails and toenails before nail clippers and scissors were invented. So yes, we have gone all over the place, haven't we, with our questions? That was just a few of the questions that we've answered about the ancient Greek and Roman world over the last sessions. And of course, there can only be one prize that we're giving out at one particular period of time. And on reflection, having sort of gone back through and had a look at them all, I have to say that Varsha Roche asking about fingernails and toenails and how they were cut and filed down before the invention of nail clippers and scissors was an aspect of the ancient world that I had never, ever thought about or considered before. So Varsha, the prize is going to you, the copy of X Marks the Spot. Do get in touch with us via Gmail, michaelscottacademic@gmail.com, or directly through the Facebook page to say where in the world we should send the copy of X Marks the Spot to for you, and also kind of let us know what dedication you would like written in it, to you, to somebody else, a particular message, and of course a signature as well. Congratulations, Varsha. Congratulations to all of you for all of the questions that we've picked out of the many questions that we get sent in. So thank you so much for sending in those questions, because they are the lifeblood of this Q&A, and it's the joy of everything that we all come together to celebrate in these sessions. So congratulations, Varsha. Congratulations to all of you. And of course, we have new questions coming in all the time, including I am determined. Good afternoon, Marietta. Good afternoon, Liz. Hello, Benita. Hello, Sarah. How are you guys all doing? I'm determined to get to some questions that I've been wanting to answer for quite a little time. They keep kind of slipping through my grasp as we run out of time. So I'm going to put those first this time, and we're definitively going to do them before we move to some of the new questions that have come in since we met last time. So Alexis Brown, you asked this question some time ago, but it was back at the time in the UK of the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. And you were amazed by literally watching history in the making. And that got you thinking about what did the ancients do with historical moments and kind of concepts of their own long past that were very littered and visible within the landscape. Kind of how did they react to this idea of their recent history or their past and how they were commemorating it and how they were thinking about it. So I wanted to come back to this because it kind of in some ways actually it links in with a talk I was giving just last week here in Warwick at our A.G. Leventis Ancient Worlds Day, and I was talking about hero cult in ancient Greece and the particular kinds of worship that developed from the 8th century BC onwards in relation to the cult of heroes. And one of the starting points for hero cult is the Greeks literally finding tombs in their landscape that were clearly, by that stage, and when I say the Greeks, I'm talking about, say, the archaic and classical world of the Greeks, finding tombs that dated back to way before them, back into the Mycenaean era. So those great beehive tombs. And the classic example of this today is just outside of Mycenae. You can go and visit the so-called tomb of Clytemnestra. It's not, of course, but kind of it is a tomb that it was in the landscape, that was visible in the landscape, and which the Greeks made sense of, in part by attributing to a hero, and then having some kind of worship at that tomb going on, and that they would give a name and a character to that hero, and that hero, of course, would then be employed and brought into helping the community in some way, quite often on the battlefield. So that was one way in which the ancients responded to the kind of recent history that was actually in their world, in their landscape. And we see it happening also within fortifications and citadels and communities that were left kind of not just individual tombs. So Mycenae, the settlement of Mycenae, kind of continued from the Mycenaean period all the way through, probably with some gaps here and there, to be a site of habitation. But then, of course, around certain parts of it, as the stories of the Trojan War, and of course all of those wonderful heroes get circulated, and particularly from the 8th century BC onwards through into the 6th century, when the Homeric epics really start to come into their own focused form in a similar way that we have them today, then they started reflecting on the places that were in the Homeric narratives and turning them into something more. So we know that a shrine, a temple, is sort of built up in the middle of the settlement of Mycenae in the 5th century BCE as they turn these sites into sites of religious worship. So that was another way of kind of responding to not just individual graves, but to kind of wider settlements. And then there's the weird sorts of things that communities did, thinking that they themselves had ancestry and past going back in time. And we see this again particularly in the religious sphere. So in Athens, on the Acropolis, there was very famously a statue of Athena, the cult statue of Athena. Now this is not the Athena that were Parthenos, that was in the Parthenon when that was built in the 5th century. The big, beautiful marble, gold and ivory statue of Athena. No. This was an old wooden statue of Athena that was thought to be the original cult statue of Athena that had been on the Acropolis since time immemorial. And there was a word in Greek for these things, xoana, the wooden statues, that were thought revered as being the most ancient and most religious and most kind of sacred in some ways. And it was to that wooden statue that the Athenians brought the robe, the new robe of Athena, the peplos, each year in their kind of Panathenaic procession. So there would be lots of these. Different communities had old statues that acquired enormous symbolism as a continuity of practice, symbols of their continuity of practice and their long relationship with the gods. But then there were also moments when communities actually had to sort of explain to themselves why they were doing a particular thing. And one of the best ways of explaining it was that it was something that dated back in time to a particular moment which still had to be observed in some way. So, for instance, different cities had in their sacred calendar that at a certain point of the year they actually did a particular sacrifice to a particular deity, but then maybe also sent off treasures, or indeed sometimes people, to other Greek cities. And they were like, well, why do we do this? And they would turn it to themselves, or justify it to themselves, continuing it through an explanation of something that had happened in the not too distant past. So kind of, there were all these ways in which the Greeks thought about and related themselves and made sense of what they did in the present through their past, but also chose to anchor themselves back to the past and try to employ the past, particularly in forms of heroes, in order to make it useful to them today. So Alexis, thank you so much indeed for your question. Absolutely brilliant. We had another one that I wanted to get to coming in from Steve Reel, who's asking about a favourite author, or kind of, who are the people who have really got me thinking over my time, kind of thinking about the ancient world, and kind of that just, but to a certain extent, the way they write and what's really kind of made me identify with or really want to read the writing of a particular person. I think this is a really interesting question, and I'm sure we've all got people, haven't we, different writers, whether that be sort of non-fiction, more specialist stuff, or whether it be fictional writing, that just somehow just click with us and actually become extraordinarily important, engaging, influencing and curating, forming our own approaches to the way we write stuff and the way that we think about stuff. And for me, just thinking about the classical world, I'll never forget picking up a book by Anthony Snodgrass. I know, the best name in the world, isn't it? Anthony Snodgrass, who was a professor of archaeology at Cambridge, and he wrote some time ago now, kind of in the late 70s, I think it was, perhaps early 80s, a book called The Age of Experiment, which was a really new and innovative way of looking at the time at the archaic period, which doesn't really sound from its title like the Age of Experiment, does it? But he was completely turning on its head this sort of sense that the archaic period was just building up to the classical period, and actually making us think that it was the period that enabled the classical period to happen because it was the age of experiment. But it's not so much the argument that he was putting forward, it was the clarity of his writing. And I've kind of taken from that this idea that, kind of actually the best kind of writing is the one that can explain some of the most complex ideas in the most simple way possible. Simple, clear, effective. Doesn't mean at all that the thoughts and the thinking is not complex. The argument's complex, but you don't need a complex style of writing to get across a complex idea. And for me, Anthony Snodgrass is absolutely key to driving that home. But then I would also think about people like Pat Easterling, whose way of writing about Greek tragedy was absolutely spot on. It really, really spoke to me. As well as kind of for good history writing, J.K. Davies, Professor J.K. Davies of Liverpool, absolutely love the way that he writes, because he writes with a humour, right, and an irony, but also a good eye on the modern analogy and bringing it in to make the ancient world come to life. So kind of those are just three writers for me, Steve, that have sort of really helped combine and influence the way that I try to write about the ancient world. So kind of tell us, do get in touch now. Let us know on the messaging system while we're here on the Q&A about writers that really have inspired you, or let us know through the Facebook page, or continue the discussion on the community page as well. But it's absolutely the case that we all have those people that have helped contribute to developing the styles and ways that we want to write. Oh, bless you, Jenny, for your kind writing about X Marks the Spot. Reading like a novel. Good, easy to follow and get involved. Yes, these are exciting stories in X Marks the Spot, and we wanted them to be exciting and engaging at the same time as actually informative and bringing that bigger context to the individual story of discovery. And that's the big joy for me from writing X Marks the Spot, was thinking about what is it, that bigger context. Is it geopolitical? Is it actually thinking about the passions of archaeology at any particular point in time that have nudged and pushed people towards thinking about and trying to find out about particular past at particular times, right? That's been a kind of, I think it's a key thing that we often forget. But then on the other side of the equation, the way in which an object or a place, once it's discovered, is not just the purview of archaeologists to argue over what it means, but actually it takes on a place in the public imagination, and actually kind of then following that journey kind of through as to what those objects do and then what they come to speak to in the public realm, kind of has been equally important and kind of crucial for me in writing the book. So Steve, thank you so much indeed for your question. And we've got one more. It was a joint question coming in from Hannah Jones and Ricardo Guarte, asking about thoughts on the so-called deals to return the Parthenon marbles to Greece. Now, this came up when I was at Chalk Valley History Festival, giving my talk about X Marks the Spot. Obviously, this is a book about archaeology and discoveries, and part of that is, what do we do with these discoveries, often that were made a long time ago, sitting in a particular place, normally the home of the discoverer, in a museum or an institution related to the country of the discoverer, and is that the right place for them? We were thinking about the objects from Machu Picchu, for instance, that have been returned from the Yale Peabody Museum to Peru in recent years, and the ongoing discussions around things like the Rosetta Stone, the British Museum, and of course the Parthenon marbles. And what came out for me from writing the book is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach here. We may have some underlying principles we might want to adhere to, and of course those are now kind of built into archaeology as it goes forward. But actually, in terms of correcting past wrongs, if we want to think of it in those terms, then there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. And that became very clear if you look at the chapter relating to the Princess of Altai, the Siberian princess, in X Marks the Spot. Here again, the body was taken away from the area of the Altai back into kind of central Russia for study for a period of time, but then was demanded back by the tribal elders of the Altai. It was returned in 2012, but the problem since then has been that actually no further investigation and study of the body has really been allowed, and there are complexities over it being on display within the area. So kind of the return is not simply the answer to all the problems. That always needs to be balanced off against the ability to continue to study and interpret the objects, to be able to glean more and more about the pasts that they come from. And in terms of the Parthenon marbles, also that's more complicated by the particularities of the legal situation in which the British Museum can't formally let them go without an Act of Parliament, which of course that's not really going to happen. Yet the Greek government won't even make a request for a loan because they don't want to acknowledge that they're the British Museums to loan anywhere. And so we're going to have come up with some kind of sharing agreement which gets around this terminology of who owns it and who loans it. And an interesting example of this is that the Vatican recently gave back their own bit of the Parthenon. When they gave it back, what did they do? They didn't actually give it to the Greek government. Instead, they loaned it or gave it to the Greek Orthodox Patriarch in Constantinople as a gift. And then that was then returned via him to Greece as well. So lots of different, in particular, individual ways of solving the particular problems. But we have to make sure that we are not trying to apply a one-size-fits-all approach, and instead this is about trying to find a solution that works in the individual case. When it's going to be available in the US, I don't have a date yet for when X Marks the Spot will be available in the US. All fingers crossed that it will be soon. But in the meantime, fingers crossed that you can get access to it via amazon.co.uk perhaps, and have it posted over, or indeed get the Kindle edition via amazon.co.uk. But I'm not sure if it's available on Audible as the audiobook at the moment, but not quite sure again whether that is immediately available in the US. Watch this space for that. So thank you. Those are the questions I really wanted to get to, that I've been waiting to get to. So before we carry on with a few more questions from this week, let's have a look at some of the great things that have been going on in the ancient world as we do. Not just in the ancient world, but about the ancient world, and of course some of the great podcast, books, events that are happening that you could be getting in touch with over the summer. So some of the favourite things that have been happening in the news about the ancient Greek world for me, talking about sportsmen as celebrities in the ancient Greek and Roman world. This is absolutely true, that there were so many games, and as we go on from the classical into the Hellenistic and the Roman times, so much prize money that could be won from these games, that you do really have professional athletes who went round on continual cycles around the wider Mediterranean world in all of these competitions. They then rack up massive numbers of victories. We know about one guy in the 5th century who was a wrestling specialist. 1,300 victories he had in a wide variety of games across his career, and that was on his tomb. So in that sense, it's absolutely extraordinary, isn't it, that we can have all of these sorts of professional athletes moving around the ancient world, and they do become celebrities, and they often get celebrity names as well, particularly in the wrestling and the boxing. They get all sorts of celebrity names or nicknames that they're known, just like we do with wrestlers and boxers today. In Rome, the square where Julius Caesar was killed will be open to the public. People are going to be able to stroll the spot, kind of when a new walkway on the ancient site in the old Republican Forum kind of opens up, and that happened kind of just a bit earlier in the summer. So if you're in Rome this summer, do go and take a look at that. And then the kind of new virtual reality app that lets you travel back to ancient Greece. So this has been set up by friends and colleagues who work at the University of Bristol. This is in regard to the Oracle of Dodona, and you can have a virtual reality experience of going to consult the god Zeus at the Oracle of Dodona. But be careful what you wish for or the questions that you ask. And then the Times, this has been a really interesting news here in the UK, that an assessment of state schools, particularly primary level state schools in the UK, has found actually that Latin is now the fourth most taught language in primary schools, right? Not private schools, state schools, the whole school curriculum. French obviously really up there, but kind of Latin is coming in as the fourth most taught language, which is an extraordinary turnaround for the kind of story of teaching Latin in schools, and one that needs to be celebrated and applauded. And of course, we need to move on and continue to build from here to make it even more an essential part of what is being taught in schools. So absolutely brilliant. Some dates for your diary and things to get out to over the summer. First one, right now, through till February 2024, you can go and see the Return of the Gods exhibition at the World Museum in Liverpool. Absolutely brilliant. Definitely worth it. A little bit further on down the line, next March, 22nd to the 24th of March 2024, the Classical Association Conference will be happening. And this is the annual gathering of classicists from around the UK, both in the academic world and increasingly, and really importantly, for teachers from schools. And kind of members of the public are welcome to inscribe and come and be part of the conference as well. And what's more, it's happening at the University of Warwick in 2024. Yes, it is coming to Warwick. So we are hosting the Classical Association UK Conference, 22nd to the 24th of March. Details are out if you go to the classicalassociation.org website. Have a look for the link to the conference, and you can start to see some of the details there that will help you plan, and perhaps you can come and join us as well. So that's absolutely brilliant. We've had a quick question in from Tom Hughes. He's asking about the wrestlers who paid these athletes. Well, it was their winnings. So kind of they weren't just getting, like at the Olympics, a wreath around their heads, right? In fact, at a lot of the athletic competitions they were going to around the world, the prizes were financial. So you could actually win quite a lot of money and make quite a good living for yourself if you were a successful athlete. This could be, if you like, furthered by being sponsored by particular cities to go. So we know that some athletes, even though they came from one city, they got paid and sponsored to actually compete on behalf of another city, like football players moving around the world today, because that new city wanted to buy in some talent to be able to have some wins according to its name. So thanks very much for that, Tom. Get on learning on Duolingo, kind of absolutely. Marietta, what brought Latin back? Concerted efforts by a whole number of charities, including particularly Classics for All, which I'm a trustee of, that have been working tirelessly over the last decade to convince schools that Latin is worth putting on the agenda, making it new and a bit more fun and a bit more innovative to teach, and particularly understanding the value that Latin brings, not just understanding Latin, but actually how that then brings values to people learning English, and actually an understanding of a whole series of languages. We're now beginning to see the evidence that's emerging from all of the studies that have been conducted over the last 10 years to really prove that students at primary level are benefiting across their wider literacy, their wider language skills, but even their wider mathematics in some cases, from having access to the study of Latin as well. So kind of it's a real concerted effort to show that Latin has a value beyond being a symbol of kind of an educational kind of elite, or indeed of an elite kind of education. Actually, it's a core part of what should make a good educational provision work, and it helps across the board. So do come and join us in Warwick, and then a bit closer to time. So I'm going to be out on the road talking about X Marks the Spot a couple more times over the next couple of months. So I'm going to be at the Gloucester Festival kind of on the 12th of September, so we'll look out for that. We'll put all the details obviously on the Facebook page when they're all formally announced. I'm going to be in Warwick talking at the Warwick Words Festival on the 3rd of October, so do come and see us if you're up in the Warwick area. And as you may have seen on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, I'm going to be interviewing Mary Beard about her new book about Roman emperors, and particularly we're going to be doing that down in Brighton at the Brighton Pavilion, I believe, on the 2nd of October, and tickets are now available for that as well. So if you want to see Mary and I in conversation on the 2nd of October, come down to Brighton and get stuck in with your questions. Brilliant. So there's a couple of dates there. And then, of course, podcasts, great podcasts. We did a podcast for History Hack about X marks the spot, as well as one for History Extra. And I can reveal for you in the next couple of weeks, there's going to be another one for History Hit. So a different podcast coming out talking about another of the chapters in the book, which I absolutely love, which is about the island of Keros, the excavations on the island of Keros. And of course, if you haven't seen the new Indiana Jones film, get out and see it. I won't give any spoilers in case you haven't been to see it, but I'm sure you all have in one form or another. I went to see it a couple of days ago. I absolutely loved it, and it's a really interesting emerging response, I think, to this movie, in that on the one hand, all the kind of critics' responses have been a bit lukewarm. But on the other hand, the actual audience-going responses have been very, very, very strong. People enjoying it as a well-thought-out story, a good conclusion in some ways to the Indiana Jones saga that we've been living with since 1981, when Indiana Jones first broke onto our screens. And I would be very much in that latter camp. I think there's some excellent moments. I think the script writing has been tight. I think kind of actually the way they've resolved the story or followed the story through has worked very well. And there are some absolutely epic moments. Syracuse is all I've got to say to you. Syracuse. Yes, Indiana in Syracuse in all sorts of forms and times. Oh, I was so jealous. And I absolutely thought they were going to leave it there. I did not think they were going to continue it past that moment, I have to say. Hopefully I'm not giving anything away now. I'm going to shut up and won't say any more. Do send your thoughts in, of course, about the Indiana Jones film to the Facebook page and on the community page. Let us know what you've been thinking about it. Let's run a poll, I think, about who loved it, who hated it, and who was somewhere in the middle, because it's a very important moment in the story of all of us, right, who have absolutely loved the past. And kind of X marks the spot is a kind of testament to that. Now, John, you say until next time, stay safe. Yes, we are in our few final moments, and I have some announcements to make. As some of you will have seen from Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, I've been offered a new job at the University of Warwick, which is to become Pro-Vice-Chancellor for International Affairs. And this is a big job and it's a big honour, and I'm absolutely honoured and delighted to be taking on the role. I'm quite daunted in some ways by it as well. That's kicking off from the 1st of September, and effectively what it means is that I'm there as part of the university leadership team. Now, it's going to mean a lot of changes. And it's going to mean kind of a lot of travel, and it's going to mean a kind of a very intense workload. As a result, I have taken the very sad decision that I'm going to have to pull back from a number of things that I do, particularly in that kind of wider classics world. And one of those is going to be this Q&A. Now, kind of that is sad news. I know it will come as sad news to you guys, sad news to me as well. So what we are going to do is we are going to have one more final Q&A, live Q&A, which is going to be on the 17th of August, Thursday, 5 p.m. on the 17th of August, and we are going to revel in the ancient world one final time before I step into this new role. So what I want to do, and I'll say this again next time kind of in great extent, is to thank you all for having been absolutely brilliant. We have done, this is our 111th Q&A, and our final one next time on the 17th of August will be our 112th. But when we come together for our 112th Q&A, then kind of we will have a bit of a celebration. We will think about the ancient world entirely. And then post that, of course, the Facebook page will continue kind of with all the great comments and all the great kind of flags about all the stuff that's happening, both in the ancient world and the modern world. And when I do get a chance to get out and about, you will be the first to know it through the community page and the classics page. And of course, you can still send in your questions about the ancient world, and when I get a chance to do so, I will respond. And I very much hope that you will continue to have the same kind of really positive and exciting excited community feel around the Facebook page and the community Facebook page that you have always had. And I look forward to dropping in occasionally, as well as, of course, through social media on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, giving you, kind of taking you with me where I go in the world on this next kind of role, on this next kind of journey and exciting adventure. So kind of we are almost out of time, but just to recap. So Thursday, the 17th of August at 5 p.m, join us for our last live Q&A. Do keep sending in your questions until then, because we can answer them next time. You can send in your questions to michaelscottacademic@gmail.com or through the Facebook page. And we'll have a chance next time just to sort of reflect on what we've achieved together over the last 5 years of Q&A. It has been since 2018 when we kicked off. But until then, and kind of, I've still got some more questions that I haven't got to, but we are out of time. We are out of time. Stay safe. Look forward to seeing you on the 17th of August. Do send in your questions and thoughts. And let's have that Indiana Jones poll running so we can come back and say what the really important people think, that's you guys, about the Indiana Jones movie next time we meet. So until then, when we will be talking perhaps a little bit about questions like, was Trajan a good emperor? What happened before clocks were invented? And if you had to write a historical romance, what would it be? So in those cases, for all of that, come back next time, 17th of August. Stay safe until then. All best wishes to you all. And as ever, thank you. Take care.